right, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and taking time to join us tonight. We are recording this, and so it will be posted as well. My name's Erica Nelson, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellen. And tonight I'm joined by Mike Murray from the Bloomingdale Township Mental Health Auxiliary. Our roles tonight will be as moderators. Milton Township will have an opportunity this April on the 6th to pass a referendum to start a community mental health board. And tonight we are dealing with the subject of developmental and intellectual disabilities. This program is the third of 4 programs on how mental health boards could work in the Milton community. We're going to hear from 3 accomplished professionals. Mike, anything you want to add?
Yes, Erica, I do have a few comments. I'd like to remind the Milton Township citizens that the over 80 708 boards in Illinois fund critical services for children and adults with intellectual and other types of developmental disabilities, as well as mental health services and substance abuse treatments. However, what's truly unique about 708 boards is that 100% of the funds remain local, and that local focus provides much needed funding, among other things, for expanding early intervention. And of course, early intervention leads to reduced costs later on. Communities, from my experience talking with boards around the state, reduce or eliminate gaps in services, and there are a lot of those for a whole lot of complex reasons. But above all else, for me, when you're in crisis, there's nothing more effective and comforting than a local response. I know I always prefer dealing locally whenever possible. But we have 3 people tonight, Erica, who have dedicated their lives to service. And I can't wait to learn from their experiences. Would you kindly introduce our first speaker?
Yes, thanks so much. I'd be happy to. I want to mention briefly that if you have a question tonight, the Q&A is available, keeping it open so that if there are questions that can be answered during the content time, we won't wait till the end of the session to do that. So please put them in Q&A, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. Our first speaker tonight is Teresa Forthofer. Teresa is President and Chief Executive Officer of Easter Seals DuPage and the Fox Valley region. Teresa is not only a 30-year professional, but also a mother to 2 sons with disabilities. Teresa, welcome.
Welcome.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know our parent is trying to get in, so if you could take a look at that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, we'll keep an eye on it and move her over as soon as she's here.
Thank you. And my name is Teresa, and as Erica said, I'm the President and CEO at Easter Seals DuPage and Fox Valley. And we provide expert multidisciplinary pediatric services for more than 3,000 infants, children, and adults with mild developmental delays to complex disabilities or medically complex disabilities. We serve children from the infancy until young adulthood. What sets us apart is that we are the only CARF accredited rehabilitation center in this part of the state. There are 2 in the entire state. We're an NDT Center of Excellence as well. We're a teaching facility. We have EI, early intervention, credentialed therapists. That's for children 0 to 3. And we're also multidisciplinary. So we have a variety of therapists and disciplines that we have professional and experienced trained therapists. We have expertise in developmental impairments such as autism and several others, genetic impairments, neurological impairments, orthopedic impairments, trauma and injury, including brain injury, and conditions requiring nutrition and feeding interventions. We have a variety of, we treat over 200 types of disabilities and developmental delays, again, from very mild to medically complex. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I wanted to be sure that the community understood is how are we funded? We are not funded by the National Easter Seals Organization, and that's often what people assume. We pay dues to be an affiliate of the national organization in order to use the name and some of the brand materials. The national organization focuses on national advocacy, education, and awareness, but locally we are all individual 501c3s running in the local community. We accept all commercial insurance, Medicaid, and early intervention. And that's really important because a lot of services are not supporting families who have Medicaid or early intervention because the reimbursement rate is critically low. And we'll talk about that in a minute. In 2020, 25% of our revenue was received through community support. And that's individuals, corporations, foundations, and of course, 708 boards. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share some facts and figures. So 17% of Illinois children start school with a disability or a developmental delay, and 25% of our kids starting school have an unidentified disability. The total spending to provide this combination of regular and special education services to students is very expensive, $77.3 billion, or on average $12,474 per student. But we know that by addressing developmental delays early in a child's life and intervening and being able to provide those therapeutic services while their brain is developing, we can actually save and reduce the expensive intensive school-based approach. According to the CDC, disability costs and healthcare expenditures are $16 billion per year in Illinois. And well-designed early childhood interventions have been found to generate a return on society ranging from $1.80 to $17 for each dollar spent. And I think, that gives you a perspective of the state and but what I want to talk about now is how it's impacted specifically in Milton County. So according to the US Census, there are more than 30,000 children living in Milton County. And we know that 37.5% of residents live below the poverty level, and 5.5% of residents live below 50% of the poverty level. So that's a huge number. And the CDC also reports that the average rate of disability among children is 17.8%. So if you take all of that data and you look at Milton County's children, there are 5,340 children living in Milton County with a developmental delay or disability, and 2,296 that live in poverty. And in Easter Seals, we are the largest, most comprehensive rehabilitative provider for children. And we serve 190 of those 2,296 kids. That means there's a lot of children who aren't being served. 54% of the children we serve are under the age of 5. We know the importance of early intervention for children and how it changes the brain development. And so we need to really think about how are we going to serve those communities. Next slide, please.
Teresa, can I ask you a quick question before we move
Certainly.
on? When we talk about this number of 190 children from Milton Township that you serve, and so there's this significantly large number that are not, where do they go? What happens?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we don't know where all of them go, but we do know what happens is a lot of them end up not showing up in preschools or being kicked out of preschools for quote unquote behavior issues when maybe they have autism or an underlying disability, and so they show up when they enter school, and that then means that they've missed those years. Some have private services. There are certainly other providers, but there's still a large portion that are simply undiagnosed and not receiving services until they end up in the school system.
That is a challenge at a minimum. And I know that when you talk about the budget, and then earlier in one of your slides, you talked about the return to society ranging from just under $2 to $17 for each dollar spent. And so it's that whole idea of getting ahead of it, that intervention piece, that preventative piece that you're really addressing that is a message that doesn't always get to the right people in a timely way.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What happens is it's such a drain on the school system, and they end up having children enter school without any services in the past, and that's a drain on the school expenses, the classroom. There's a lot of variety of impacts when we can see kids early and connect them to the early childhood programs at the school district and work in collaboration with them. They are often so much better off by the time they enter kindergarten. And many of them, if they get the right services early, won't even need an IEP. But unfortunately, an individualized education plan, sorry. But if without it, often you're spending a lot of time developing those individual education plans for children who have been underdiagnosed or undiagnosed.
Right, right. Thank you. I'll let you go ahead to your next slide. And I
Sure.
just want to let you know that our parent is here as well.
Terrific. So yeah, one of the things I want to talk about is the Milton Township. We talked about those who are living in poverty as being a pretty large percentage. Medicaid currently reimburses pediatric therapy lower than they did in 2007.
Wow.
So we're getting less of a reimbursement rate than we did, what, 13, 14 years ago. And as you know, costs go up. And so we have to limit services. We still take Medicaid. Most providers do not. It covers approximately 35% of our direct service. We just couldn't keep our doors open if we offered services to everyone who needed it. And that's a lot of those kids that aren't being seen. Many pediatric therapy providers don't accept Medicaid. The early intervention system is a little better. They provide services to those 0 to 3 who have a 30% or higher developmental delay. They reimburse at 75% of the cost of direct service. They require in-home therapy with no reimbursement for travel or expenses. So we have to limit the radius in which we'll go to see a child through EI. And many experienced and highly trained pediatric providers do not accept EI, again, because of the reimbursement rate. And one of the things I want to make a real strong point about here, because it's something that we advocate for all the time, is a 30% delay for a child who's in infancy to 3 years old is significant. And so what about that child with a 25% delay? They're not getting the services unless they have private insurance. And so we're doing a disservice at a time when the child's brain development is so critical. We have uninsured. That's been a huge problem that we've seen, especially over the last year, where people are unable to afford the COBRA if they've lost their job. The extraordinary expense of healthcare with $10,000 deductibles, $50 copays for every session, and a client may be coming multiple times a week if they're medically complex. And healthcare policies often limit the number of services a child can be just based on their policy, not based on the individual needs of the child. So local funding is so critical to being able to support the children who live locally. It's necessary, and it's also very fiscally responsible. Any questions before I turn it over to Arlie O'Brien, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience as a parent?
No, I just want to reinforce the incredible importance of prevention. I know that Mike Murray and I, who are on tonight, have been speaking at some of our local boards and city councils. And one of the things that Mike has reinforced, and I as well, is the critical importance of getting ahead of this. And that when you have those local resources and you can identify the gaps, and these are non-duplicated services for a 708 Community Mental Health Board, we can see all the services that are not being provided that we could provide support for, and so many more children to get ahead of that need. So I appreciate the detail on this, and we'll be forwarding this to folks to be able to have a look at that. But yes, let's have Arlie join us.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Aurelie, and my daughter is 3 years old and has a very rare and challenging disability. We have received early intervention services and have seen Lurie's children's specialist, but we were unable to find a nutritionist who understood her disability and understood the need to just not have the calories increase, to know more about her. We knew that the proper nutrition was important for her brain and development and ability to meet other developmental milestones. And eventually we were lucky enough to find ECCL's DuPage and Fox Valley. They have a wonderful team of specialists in feeding, nutrition, and speech, and other services as well. Because we have Medicaid, we are limited to 5 services a month, but it's far more than what we would get through hospitals. Most other providers don't even accept Medicaid. Currently, Aubrey receives speech services through Easter Seals, and we never thought that Aubrey would speak, but now she has some words and is making animal noises as well. Even during COVID, we have been able to continue receiving services in the safely manner, and so Aubrey can grow and continue to develop new skills. I am grateful for all the local support and has enabled my family and Aubrey to receive services at Easter Seals.
Thank you so much, Aurelie, for sharing that with us. And just very briefly, how did you find Easter Seals to get these services? What was that connection?
I've had family friends that have had special needs as well, and now they're grown, but it has not been in the special needs has not been in the family or known of. But I found out through one family, close family, that Easter Shields was around. Also, I have friends that go to St. Pius, which is on the other side of Easter Seals, so it's all local.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad you found them and they found you and Aubrey.
Yes, so thankful for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thanks
Thank
for
you so
being here
much.
tonight as well.
Thank you.
Teresa, thank you. We may have some questions, so I know we're all going to stay together, but I'm going to move on tonight to our second speaker, and that's Lori Baker. Lori is the president and CEO for the Association of Individual Development. AID is headquartered in Aurora and provides a broad array of services to those with developmental disabilities. Lori, we haven't yet really defined what developmental disability is. It's a broad term. And I wonder if you could start out by clarifying that spectrum that we call both intellectual and developmental disabilities, and would really like to hear about the good work of AID and how you partner with other 708 boards.
Thank you, Erica. Thanks for having me here tonight. Basically, an intellectual disability is done through a variety of tests and criteria that are met in order to meet the definition for intellectual or developmental disability. Most of the time, the agreed upon term is having an IQ of less than 70, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, or autism. Autism is oftentimes an outlier that is difficult to get developmental disability or intellectual disability services for, because oftentimes people have a higher IQ than 70. And even though they are listed as eligible intellectual or developmental disability for services, oftentimes that's misunderstood in the community, and particularly through Medicaid, in order to access autism services. Any other condition which results in an impairment similar to that caused by an intellectual disability and which requires ongoing services and supports. Intellectual disability needs to originate or start before the age of 18. It needs to be of indefinite time period. So, this is not a disability that's going to end or be recovered from and have substantial impairments. And when they look at those criteria, the testing for intellectual and developmental disability criteria, they're going to look at that intellectual piece, that IQ piece, as well as adaptive behaviors and a person's ability to perform functions of daily living and regular activity. Next slide, please. So AID has been around since 1961. We have the same origin story as many people, including Ray Graham, except for I think they were a little bit earlier than us, is that we had a group of parents who had children with disabilities who, before the Special Education Act, had nowhere to go and no support for their children. And so people came together in communities that were aware of each other and created a lot of not-for-profits around Illinois and around the western suburban region here where we work. We have started out like that. Once the Special Education Act passed, we were able to then pass that school on to the Aurora School District, and had already started some additional services in the early 80s. We also became a community mental health center, and we work with persons, about 5,600 children and adults, mostly adults, across about a 7-county area in the last fiscal year. Our mission is to empower people with physical, developmental, intellectual, and mental health challenges to enjoy lives of dignity and purpose. Our main service areas are listed there. We're also in DeKalb, a bit of northern Cook, and a little bit of Will County, because just like Naperville, Aurora is in 4 different counties. So it makes things interesting. Next slide, please. So we have a long history at AID of partnering with community mental health boards, and because we are in a variety of locations, there are several different types that we partner with. We have county-wide boards in Kendall, DeKalb, and McHenry counties. So all of the funds that are raised are within an entire county and are able to be dispersed across the county. We also work with city-sponsored boards in Geneva and St. Charles, which are in central Kane County. And then in southern Kane County, there is a community mental health funding alliance, which is made up of 7 townships in southern Kane. And so they pool their money together and have people that sit on their 708 board from all of the various townships that are listed here: Aurora, Batavia, Big Rock, Blackberry, Caneville, Sugar Grove, and Virgil townships, in order to grant funding towards services. Just recently in Kane County, Elgin Township and Dundee Townships approved 708 referendums, and those boards have been meeting and putting together their plan, and will be putting out a RFP for their first granting cycle soon. Yeah, so it's very exciting. They both have elected, I believe, to levy the rate at the highest amount that's allowable. All of these boards are very important because they help provide funding for services that can't be billed to Medicaid. So as Teresa spoke earlier about the deficits in funding in terms of paying for what a service truly costs, Medicaid does not pay for what it really costs to deliver a service. And there are many services that are not Medicaid allowable, depending upon whether a person is using Medicaid waiver services or state plan services, and what is approved within those packages in Illinois. So at AID, we have a variety of services that we receive funding from 708 boards for. So some dietitian services, some nursing services that are above and beyond the small amount that we get for nursing within our DD waiver services, psychiatric support. As Teresa mentioned, psychiatrists can get about $250 or $300 an hour, and The state rate pays about half of that. So it's very difficult to get psychiatric access, even harder to get it for people with a dual diagnosis of developmental disability and a mental health diagnosis. We also run at AID a crisis phone line and a text line that anyone in the Fox Valley area, and actually we get calls from all over the place, can call. And that's a totally unbillable service, right? Because if someone's in crisis and calling you upset, distraught, looking for services, trying to figure something out, you're not going to ask them, okay, what's your insurance and what's the number and what's your name and all that. And so that's been very helpful in order to offer that level of support to people. We are able then to answer victim services and other crisis situations in the community through that crisis phone and text line. The other way that we have requested 708 funds and partnered with our 708 boards is funding for people who don't receive Medicaid. So we still have people that are not eligible for Medicaid, often persons that are undocumented or for some other reason are ineligible for Medicaid, still have disabilities and health needs. So we often are able to fund people that way. And in the DD system, we have long waiting lists for people to receive even Medicaid funded services. And so we have supported some groups of people in accessing our community day services or employment services or other pieces through 708 board partnerships that pay for people in their township who are unable or have no insurance in order to be able to pay for that service. The other thing that 708 boards are good for is being able to pay for innovative practices and ideas that we need to try out in the community in order to get them someday to be Medicaid eligible, right? So you have to prove that something works and you have to have funding to be able to try things out. For example, many services in a more modernized version of housing where people have their own apartments and access to services and supports in order to live there isn't necessarily paid for within our Medicaid waiver for intellectual and developmental disability services. So being able to receive funding that is more flexible and able to serve the person in the way that they wish to be served in their community are very beneficial to have through partnerships with 708 boards.
Right. I'm going to turn it over to Mike in a minute, but I just want to, for clarity for folks, and what year did the Special Education Act get passed? Do you remember?
It's in the 70s. I can't remember, 72 maybe?
I was going to say the early 70s, right?
It was early 70s, but it took a long time. I mean, that's horrifying when you think about it, for children not to have any intervention. You know, Teresa was talking about early intervention earlier. People had no intervention and no assistance, you know, so that's amazing to me that it took that long for us to do that.
Thanks for giving us that kind of line of sight, because I think it's important for folks to understand that. Mike, you had a question or two as a follow-up.
I got a couple questions. First of all, we've had some people in the community question the need for 708 mental health boards because they say the state and the county, well, it's their responsibility and they do everything, you know. So how would you answer those people that say like, well, the state and the county have this all covered?
So that's not correct. The state does have some responsibility, but cannot meet the need at the moment. I don't know if people read the paper, but we have a lot of financial issues in the state of Illinois and are currently underneath 3 class action lawsuits that mandate how we serve people with disabilities in the community. And we're still unable to meet all the need with the funding that is available. The thing that I love about a 708 board and that I think is the biggest selling point and why I as a taxpayer would vote for one in my community is the fact that this is local money meeting local needs in the way that that community says needs to be met. So the 708 board makes the plan looking at what is available and not available in their community and what people need. The provider is able to apply for those funds, and then the consumer is able to receive those services if they live in the township, city, or county that the 708 board represents. So I wish that federal, state, and counties were able to foot the bill for all of it, but the fact is that counties don't pay for any disability services unless they have a countywide 708 board. The state pays for a set amount. They have a set amount of money and are able to work within that framework, but our prioritization of urgency for need for service, or PUNS list in the state of Illinois for intellectual and developmental disability services, has thousands of people on it waiting to receive service. These are adults that are on the adult PUN list. And every year when children turn 22, they are then eligible to go on that PUNS list or eligible for adult services, which just means that number continues to grow.
Wow.
And one of the things I would add to that, Lori, because I too would vote for a 708 board in my community. And what I have found is that it enables all of the agencies to actually work together and be more collaborative. So you're not duplicating services. I'm reaching out to AID, to Ray Graham. So instead of trying to do everything myself at Easter Seals, I now know who those other partners are, what they bring to the table. And the 708 boards really help I think strengthen the health and human services agencies that are in that community to work more efficiently and effectively.
Right. Yeah, I agree, Teresa. I think that's a great point. Both of you have brought this up. And again, one of the kind of I guess, if you're not doing your homework, you wouldn't know this, but really the by state statute, the role of that community mental health board is to create that line of sight to those services, to bring that together. A 708 board does not provide services. It brings together those agencies that are already the experts. They understand how to do this. They have the relationship with their clients and families. And a 708 community mental health board, again, local resources to local need, is pulling that together. So that's an excellent point. Yeah. Lori, thank you. Anything else you would add before we move to Kim?
No, I don't think so. But, I think people need to make sure that they look at the reality and not what the concern is. People will misunderstand and talk about, the hate of taxes and all that kind of stuff. And, when you looked at the number before for $6 a month, you can help out a local family member, friend, loved one that needs access to service. And I think everyone knows through this pandemic of people that need assistance, right? Whatever assistance that might be. This is a way to do that for less than what you spend at Starbucks. So I think it's, it's not onerous. You get to direct it as a taxpayer through your community mental health board, how that money is spent, and you get to then feel good about supporting citizens in your community, your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, in being able to live the life that they wish to lead in the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lori, because they are our neighbors. We've made that point, right? These are our neighbors, our community residents, and we want to keep people in their neighborhoods, in their communities as much as we can. So thank you for that. Our final speaker tonight is Kim Zeller, President and CEO of Ray Graham Association. She is actually hosting this webinar through Ray Graham. So thank you so much, Kim, for doing that. In addition, Ray Graham has contributed to our referendum effort by helping to prepare the literature we've been handing out door to door. And those green ribbons, you've probably seen them around. They're a very pretty satin green, forest green ribbon. And I have some at home still here. So if anybody wants one, you could certainly reach out to me through our Facebook page, Mental Health Boards for DuPage. Kim, we're hoping you can speak to how Illinois compares with other states when it comes to serving people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. And I'm sure that COVID-19 and this pandemic has affected the developmental disability community. Can you please share how you've adapted and any potential, long-term implications of this public health crisis?
Thanks, Erica. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. For those of you who don't know, Ray Graham Association has been around since 1950. And since we mentioned the Special Education Act, I will just mention that Ray Graham was actually the first director of special education in the state of Illinois. And at some point, we adopted his name because he was quite the pioneer in terms of ensuring that our young people with disabilities in schools, or at that time not in schools, had the right to a full and complete education. Every year we serve around 2,000 children and adults. Our services fall into 5 primary areas. Residential, meaning a variety of residences, apartments, single family homes, where support is customized, whether it be a few hours a week or 24/7. Recreation services, which includes a whole host of, Special Olympic activities to therapeutic horseback riding services and lessons at our Hansen Center. We also provide a variety of services that focus on life skills development. That comes in all different shapes and sizes, that really focuses on functional life skills and supporting people to learn how to use their community so that they can become full community members, just like everybody else wants to be. We do a great amount of work in the area of employment, helping people to become gainfully employed in their community is one of the most important things that we do. When someone asks you, Erica and Mike, what do you do? They're not asking you, what do you do on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock? What do you do means, what's your occupation? What's your career? And we want everyone that we support to be able to proudly say what their career or occupation is. Not only does it give you money in your pocket, but it also gives you a great deal of satisfaction and self-esteem. We also focus on supporting families to stay together. And that is, you mentioned the pandemic, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but that has turned into an enormous amount of focus over this past year with the extra stress that's been added to families. Every day we focus on our mission, and that's to create opportunities that empower people with disabilities to reach, grow, and achieve. So how does Illinois compare to other states? Lori mentioned that if you read the newspaper, and don't even have to dig too deep into the words, that Illinois has a horrible financial position. However, that did not happen overnight, and it did not happen as a result of the pandemic. It did not happen because of one party or the other party politically. Illinois used to be a well-respected state 15 or so years ago. We were among the first states to move forward with integrated supported employment for people. We were already moving to smaller integrated homes when the rest of the states around our country were not. But at some point, the spigot literally shut off. Community providers like ours went a decade without one single cost of doing business increase, not one. In that same time period, if my memory serves, inflation went up 18%. So we just plummeted in terms of a system. And sadly, people with disabilities and their families are the ones paying the price. So when you compare us against all other states in the country, we rank 47th in 3 areas. 47th in terms of our fiscal effort towards community services, which are the set of services that all 3 of our organizations have talked about providing. We rank 47th in funding that promotes inclusion. We also rank 47th in how we fund for services that lead to employment. Lori talked about the number of people waiting, and in Illinois that's called the PUNS list, but it's not even really a waiting list, it's really an unserved list. Because if you go to your physician's office, you come at your time, you sign in, everyone, it goes in order. In Illinois, that's not how it works. So you have people waiting for maybe a couple of years, people waiting up to 8 to 10 years to get services. Now, we've made a little progress, and it's only because of the class action lawsuits that Lori mentioned. However, the latest data still says that we rank 5th highest in terms of the number of people waiting for services when compared to other states. What that translates to is 18,452 people in this state are waiting for services and need services. And as you drill that down a little bit farther, that data says that there's 719 Milton Township residents that are registered on that waiting list, and 314 are saying that they need some sort of immediate service today, right now, that's not available to them.
Kim, can I interrupt you for a minute? Give us an example of a service. I know that I've shared some of these statistics that I received from you when we've been speaking at some of our public meetings. What's an example of a service?
So an example of a service could be the need for the family member with a disability to move out of the family home. Maybe it's because the caregivers are elder and unable to care for their family member anymore. So they need a residential setting, which what we refer to as a community integrated residential living arrangement here in Illinois, which essentially is a small group home where people live together with groups of about 4 or 5 people, and they have staff with them around the clock to help them to live as independently as possible. Another service might be the need for what we refer to as home-based services, which means that families want to keep their family member at home, but they need help in their home. They need a personal support worker to come and help to care for their family member, or to take their family member out to learn important life skills. Another example is what is also referred to as community day services. Many of us offer Monday through Friday during typical work hours, structured day activities that can be related to employment, vocational training, life skills development, et cetera, that are center-based or embedded in the community, that provides that structured learning and also provides respite or relief to those families during those daytime hours, so that family moms and dads can work, or just get a little break, because the stress that's involved in a home where there's 1 or 2, and I will stress that sometimes we serve multiple family members in a home that has disabilities. So those are just a few
Thank you.
examples.
Yeah, those are great. Thank you for clarifying.
So COVID-19, first of all, it is simply amazing to me that it has been almost a year to the exact date that we were ordered to stay at home here in Illinois. When that happened, not just services at Ray Graham, but services around the state were shut down. And all resources that, at least at Ray Graham, and I think I can speak for AID as well, and Teresa, Easter Seals is slightly different because they don't offer residential services, but all of our resources immediately shifted to ensure that people that live with us 24/7 were healthy and safe. Our team members worked around the clock. Many of our team members actually left their own family homes, left their children with their spouse, and moved in to our homes so that we could limit the exposure of the virus and be able to focus on people's healthcare needs that were an immediate need for us. What also happened was that those day centers shut down. Many people lost their jobs who were gainfully employed in the community, or if they were living with 3 or 4 other people who had very high medical needs, sometimes we had to ask them to step away from their employment to keep everybody else safe in their home, especially if they worked maybe in a grocery store or somewhere with the public. When those services shut down, and there was no place for people to go that would typically come to us, let's just say Monday through Friday, from 8:30 to 3, all of those folks started staying home with their families. And just that change of routine for many people is devastating. Also, with our services shut down, that also meant that mom or dad or both couldn't work. So we started to see that increase of needs in the family home. What was really very, very concerning and still concerning today is that many of the people that we support, children and adults, have underlying health conditions. So even though we know little about this virus, studies that have been conducted so far tell us that the mortality rate is 3 times greater for people who have intellectual and or other types of developmental disabilities. Much of that is because of the underlying health conditions, but also we serve a population that doesn't understand social distancing, is unable, and I'm saying really unable to because of to wear a mask. They don't understand it, and B, they can't tolerate it. Sadly, what we are finding ourselves dealing with when it comes to people, and it's just like the general population, is social isolation that's trending towards more depression. And we're really concerned about people losing everyday life skills that they were using pre-pandemic that they haven't been using for a year because they've basically been homebound. Unemployment rates are horrible when it comes to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities without a pandemic. With the pandemic, we have just seen those rates spike incredibly. And ironically, with those spiking of unemployment rates, the primary funder of Source in Illinois has come to providers like ours and Lori's and said, well, you haven't been meeting your numbers, so we're going to cut back on your contracts this year when people actually need the services the most. Our workforce were essential frontline workers. And we started to see our workforce contract the virus, their families contract the virus, their kids, just like my child and others with us tonight, doing Zoom school or remote learning. So not only do we have a crisis with the pandemic that we are trying to manage as best that we can, we're trying to keep our head above water because our workforce is equally in crisis. We have traditionally been a field that has had turnover in direct support positions because of the lack of funding. I think if we look statewide, the current rate of turnover in DSP, direct support professional roles around the state is about 53%. So over half of our direct support essential workers turn over every year. And that has a great deal to do with the lack of dedicated and consistent funding. So when I look to the future, I do fear that there will be programs and services that will unlikely never recover, because when people do not attend, there is no money that comes in. So many of the funding mechanisms are fee for service, and you can only hold on to keeping a system in place for people to return so long when there's no money coming in to do that. And that's going to, when that breaks, it will be an even greater stress on the family and on communities as a whole. But then, looking to the silver lining, I think we have all learned a lot during COVID-19 and continue to come up with great ideas for creative programming and things that could really start to bridge that gap and meet families where they are, even though we're starting to see the vaccine roll out to our population, since it was a prioritized population. Families are still very reluctant about returning to what was happening pre-pandemic. So I think it's a great opportunity to meet families where they are right now, and help them to have the funding that they need, so that, we're all talking about defining our new normal. And that's what families are trying to do too. And I think that it's a perfect opportunity for a 708 board in Milton Township to step in and to help this already, wounded system be able to meet the needs of your community members.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kim, and just all that information. I know that Mike has a question that's been on both of our minds, and that is about funding related matters. So Mike, let's ask that question and then we'll do a quick close.
Yeah, Kim, I'm just curious, and then maybe even some of the others might want to comment on this, but how much time would you say that you have to spend on funding related matters, including but not limited to the necessity of fundraisers for operational needs? As an executive, I can see the passion in each one of you for your job, and I'm wondering, how much does that subtract from that, just having to pay the light bill?
Well, I will tell you that, that the funding situation has many different layers to it. It's doing a lot of work legislatively with elected officials, so that, we're continuously beating that drum to say, hey, you need us, we need you. It is, like you said, making sure that we have the money and the reserves that we need to have the ability to sustain, so that we can meet our mission. And then it's fundraising. I remember a day, I've been at Ray Graham Association for 26 years, and I can remember a day when fundraising, when it came to doing a gala event or writing a grant, those dollars were for special projects, for cool things, for innovation. Today, for Ray Graham Association, we have to fundraise $1.8 million a year to just meet general operations. And that's because of that gap. So it's what I do every day. I come from, my history was in programs and coming up with really cool things to do. And as I've been in this role for 10 years, every year it gets harder and harder and more time is spent. So not a day goes by. I can't even quantify it, Mike.
And my story echoes Kim's almost to a T. I've been at Easter Seals for 10 years. 25% of our budget is fundraising, almost $2 million, a little more than $2 million a year. And I turned in 2 grant reports today, and I'm writing another one over the weekend. It's not about the, starting a new program or innovating or buying that piece of equipment that a child with a disability could really benefit from. It is keeping the lights on. And that's, it's a big part of what all of us do every day. And that's, again, I want to go back to, that's what makes the 708 board so important, is because it really allows us to work together, collaborate locally, and make sure that we're bringing all of those resources to the table in one community. And it's such an efficient way to utilize our time and our resources to drive to the members of the community who need it the most.
Yeah.
We have a program that serves people with intellectual and developmental disabilities with very high service needs, both behaviorally, physically, and medically. And we write our budget every year, hoping to only lose $250,000 in that program. That is a bonus because we used to lose $750,000 a year for that program. And so I don't know another business in the world that sits down to write their budget with the idea of how much money you're going to lose from your insurance funding sources, right? And you're going to raise the difference in what it truly costs to deliver the service. And as Kim and Teresa said, these are basic services. We're not getting to do really innovative, ahead of the curve. I mean, that takes even more fundraising, right, to be able to do that. I don't know another business in the world that would continue to operate from year to year, except for mission-driven organizations like the one that we serve in. And I echo Teresa's, statement that makes 708 boards even more important, because you don't want to lose a Ray Graham or an Easter Seals or an AID in your community because there's not people standing in line to take over, because it's a really challenging business. But as you can tell from all of us, we love and believe in what we do and know that the people and their families need the services and supports that we provide. And so we figure out how to get it done and really kind of get taken advantage of by the state and other places, right, that know that we're going to continue to do everything we can to try to fill the need instead of actually, paying what it costs to deliver the service.
Right. I have a really quick anecdote and then we'll thank everybody and close. But I remember during the, how many years was it that Illinois did not have a budget? Was it 2 years, right? And
2.5. It was like
2.5. Yeah. And speaking with a friend of mine that worked at the Philip Rock Center and going to work knowing they weren't going to get paid.
Yep.
Doing physical therapy, occupational therapy. I got to go to work. And that just, I think, reinforced for me the importance of getting this message out. And so, just to think about this and the importance for those who will be watching this, our recording. I want to thank everybody, those who were able to come on tonight with us to spread this message, who are a part of this community in some cases, to take the time to listen and learn. This is such a complex and layered set of stories whose theme is making sure that community members receive the services that they need and deserve, and that we have an opportunity through this community mental health board to do that in Milton Township. And I want to reinforce, and this is something Mike has shared with me over and over again in his work with Bloomingdale Township and their community mental health board, and that is that communities actually save money by making the commitment to provide this board in their township or their town or their county, whatever it might be. So I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight and remind everyone we have one more educational webinar that's on Wednesday, the 31st of March. It's on addiction and it will be equally as informative as this one. I'm going to pull out my panel so I can let everybody know who's coming. We have Jordan Esser from the DuPage County Prevention and Leadership Team, Suzanne Snyder, who's the Director of Behavioral Health at Access Community Health Network, and Mary Egan, who's with the Rosecrans Health Network, as well as Mike and myself again. So thank you so much for all you do, for the care and the dedication and the commitment and the sense of humor and the love that you bring to your work. We couldn't be more grateful to you as community members for all that you do. And thank you for being here tonight with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.